Hi, Assalamualaikum to our lecturer Dr. Mohamad bin Majid. Today we will be presenting our group project, which is the effect of financial risk management on financial performance of selected commercial banks in Malaysia. So we move on to the next slide. Introduction. There have backgrounds of study which consists of variety approach that identify the difference between financial and commercial risk. Banks are vulnerable to a variety of hazards in today's fast-paced business climate, including credit risk, liquidity risk, market risk, operational risk, and so on. Okay, we move on to the next slide. Problem statement. This is due to the extensive borrowing, financial instrument issuers, conflict of interest, and no systematic risk regulation. The feasible factors because of financial disequilibria and asset price bubbles, insufficient level of liquid asset, deviation from principle of credit risk management. For market risk, market risk is a risk of losses in a liquid portfolio due to market price changes and includes interest rates, foreign currency, equity, and commodity price risk. Okay, we move on to the next slide, which was selected commercial banks in Malaysia. It consists of four banks, which are Maybank Berhad, CIMB Group Holdings, Public Bank, and Hong Leong Bank. So we move on to the next slide. This is about the research objective, research question, and hypothesis. It consists of the impact, effect, and relationship of independent variables on the financial performance of selected commercial banks in Malaysia. So we move on to the next chapter.
Okay, next I will present about the literature review. A review is a brief summary of selected finding from secondary source. This section will review previous study in order to provide a greater knowledge and further information about the effect of financial risk management on the selected commercial bank financial performance in Malaysia. The goal of this chapter is to explore how financial risk will affect the financial performance of commercial banks. The element that can influence commercial bank performance according to Sharris ETL can 2011 can be divided into two categories, which are internal and external influence. The bank decision-making process and policy objective will have the biggest impact on internal element, stakeholders, and Word 2014. External factors, on the other hand, are macroeconomic and industry specific elements that are reflected in the economic and legal environment in which banks operate. Antagonist at the 2006. This research highlights some theories regarding each dependent and independent variable, as well as bank measurement, which are credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk, and operational risk. Dependent variable is a financial risk. According to KCD 2010, the risk management is the preparation for the more complicated action of commercial unit of business, which are caused by scientific and technical advancement. The first independent variable is show that Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and globally have a positive relationship between the credit risk and financial performance of commercial banks. There also have a research have found that negative ratio in their research. Second is market risk. According to Gachua and F 2011, the effect of foreign exchange exposure on the firm financial performance of a case of 32 chosen listed business on the Nairobi Stock Exchange is also highlighted. The data identified covered the years 2001 through 2010. The research showed that the unrealized foreign currency gains or losses had an impact on the net income of listed firm listing. They were reported to the either to income statement or the owner's equity. From this research, it includes that the financial leverage, interest and interest rate, and foreign exchange exposure have a significant relationship with the bank profitability of the financial performance. Third is liquidity risk. According to Mohd 1989, there is positive relationship between liquidity and bank profitability based on the evidence that have been found from his research on banks in 12 countries including North America, Australia, and Europe. This is due to illiquid assets that have higher liquidity, therefore the banks will receive a higher return. Last but not least, according to Habib, Masood, Hassan, Mubin, and Mike 2014 was said that there is a positive relationship between effective operational risk management with the financial performance, which will help to lower operational losses, compliance and reporting costs, early detection of illegal activities, and attention to future risks.
So, I will present on chapter 3, which is research methodology. The research framework aims to test the relationship between independent and dependent variables. As you can see from the figure, it illustrated that variables could impact the financial performance of selected bank in Malaysia, and it also includes independent variable, credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk, and operational risk. For data collection, we collected the data from annual report, Thomson Reuters data stream, and Bursa Malaysia. For annual report for each year included in this analysis, the data in calculating the ratios of the listed financial institutions will be taken from the company's annual report on an annual basis. The period for each data was from year 2010 to 2020. Next is Thomson Reuters data streams. It is a global financial and macroeconomic information platform that for 175 countries, including Malaysia, and 60 markets provide data on equities, currencies, and much more. Lastly is Bursa Malaysia. For this research, 4 financial organizations were chosen from the Bursa Malaysia Stock Exchange, which is Maybank, CIMB, Hong Leong Bank, and Public Bank Berhad. For the analysis data method, we analyze the data using descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, and regression analysis. To analyze this data, we use panel data, which is the retrieve from year 2010 to 2020 that consists of 4 types of bank, which are Maybank, CIMB Group Holding, Public Bank Berhad, and Hong Leong Bank. For the descriptive analysis, it highlights the fundamental characteristic of data in a survey and is the simplest technique to get a judgment on metrics and a set of data. The most widely used descriptive research methods for determining central tendency are mean, median, and mode. And for determining dispersion, standard deviation, variance, minimum and peak variables, kurtosis, and skewness. For correlation analysis, positive correlation means that if the independent variable rises, so does the dependent variable. Correlation near zero means that there is no tendency for the dependent variable to rise or decrease as the independent variable increases. A negative correlation means that as the independent variable rises, so does the dependent variables. As for the regression analysis, this research shows a panel research for regression analysis because more than one independent variable is being analyzed and regressed as panel data. For panel least square, regression is used by regressing panel data to identify the coincident effect of multiple independent variables to dependent variables. Besides that, for the F-test is the test that econometricians usually use to test a single or null hypothesis about a group of regression slope coefficients. And lastly, the t-test will determine if the independent variables are related to the dependent variable. It also points out whether consumption, foreign direct investment, government spending, and trade have either a positive or a negative relationship with unemployment, respectively. When calculating the t-test, the test needs the approximate formula regression value of the standard deviation.
Next, I will present our data and findings analysis. Firstly, this is the descriptive statistic for this research. Then, according to this correlation result, there are 3 independent variables that have negative correlation with the profitability of the selected commercial banks in Malaysia, which are credit risk, market risk, and liquidity risk, while the operational risk and profitability shows a positive correlation. Thirdly, for regression analysis, R-squared value is indicate the fluctuation of independent variables can be explained as 76.48% of the variance in profitability. The p-value for this regression analysis is 0.00, which can be expressed that this value has a more significant value since the value is less than 0.05. The F-statistic value is fixed, therefore the null hypothesis is failed to be rejected due to its value being more than 0.05. As for the probability value in credit risk, it is bigger than 5% level of significance. Thus, we have to retrain the null hypothesis and reject the alternative hypothesis. The credit risk index is not significant statistic. This was supported by Endoka and Islami 2016. Their research also found the same results. Next, market risk shows a variety significant relationship with the p-value shows a figure below than 0.05. The null hypothesis would be rejected. Next, the probability value for liquidity risk is less than 5% significance point. Hence, the null hypothesis has to be rejected and it was supported by Sukmana and Suryani. Thus, 2016. Lastly, the operational risk reveals that the probability figure is 0.00, which is less than 5% significance. It shows that the relationship between the operational risk and profitability of selected commercial banks is significant. It is also supported by SAE 2015.
So I will present on chapter 5 regarding the conclusion and recommendation. For research objective on the financial performance of selected commercial banks in Malaysia, the first one is to examine the impact of credit risk, while the second objective will be to examine the impact of market risk. The third objective is to examine the impact of liquidity risk, and lastly, to examine the impact of operational risk. Next, I move to the limitations on our case study. As for the limitations of these research studies, we have highlighted 3 weaknesses throughout the study. Firstly, the lack of secondary data. Even though there are abundant of records, data from the past research and other relevant sources, we have faced some issues in obtaining the data, and some websites require a premium subscription. Besides, there are time limitations for us as a student. We found out that we have a very limited time in order to finish this assignment, since there are also another assessments that have to be submitted in the same time. Finally, we have a problem with the software provided, which are Refinitiv Econ and also eViews. During the data searching, we found out that some data is missing, and thus has caused us difficulties in completing the statistical analysis. For the conclusion, financial risk is a condition that will cause a company to suffer direct and indirect losses in the form of reduced income and capital losses. As a result, banks must efficiently manage their risk in order to minimize or limit losses in order to avoid being constantly under pressure and taking on significant risks. Thus, we recommend for the commercial banks to add some variables. The future researchers can add more independent variables in order to support this type of research, and the result might be more favorable than the past and current research. Last but not least, the future researchers can do some studies on the same type of research on other countries as well. Broader scope of research can obtain a better and more satisfying result compared to other past research. I think that's all from us. Thank you, Doctor.